Welcome to the second episode of our podcast, The Juliana and Brooklyn Show. Now give it up for my co-host, Brooklyn. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode. We are so excited to do this episode because we have a lot of high school drama we're going to get into. We're going to deep dive into our high school years and how they were and our fights we've had in the past. And we're going to see where it takes us today, so buckle in. Yes, as Brooklyn said, we're going to get into our high school drama this episode, and we're going to talk a lot more about what our life was like in high school and the fights we had and the interesting stuff that went on through our high school years. So let's get started. Why don't we, Brooklyn? Well, where do you think we should start, Juliana? Should we start with the food fight we had, the snowball accident, or should we talk about the boys that we dated in high school and how stupid we were back then? I feel like we should start off with the snowball accident that happened because honestly that was the most memorable accident we had in my head, if you get it. So let's start with that one. You can tell it and then I'll tell the food fight one, okay? Oh, this story stays in my head all the time and I think about it every day still. So one day me and Juliana were walking home from school. It was like February and the snow was starting to melt a little, but there was still some ice on the roads and stuff. And Juliana threw a snowball at me while we were walking one day, and I was like, oh, hey. So we started having a snowball fight. And then all of a sudden Juliana picked up this one snowball that was already made, she said, and she threw it at my head, and it was pretty bad because I ended up getting a concussion because that snowball was literally ice, pure ice, and it was so bad. And so funny now telling the story, but it was so bad at the time because I had to go home and tell my parents how I got a concussion, and they were pretty pissed. I still feel bad till this day about it, but at the time, you should have seen me, tears rolling down my eyes as, I walked Brooklyn back to her house to make sure she was okay, and then Brooklyn's parents came outside, and they were like, you need to go home, Juliana, now. And so I go home, and I'm, sobbing the whole way home, so sad that I threw that snowball that was ice and gave my friend a concussion. It was terrible. And my parents were wondering why I was sad, and then they called Brooklyn's parents, and it was all figured out in the end, and it was all fine in the end, but it was the scariest time for Brooklyn and me because I thought Brooklyn was going to hate me for the rest of her life. I won't lie, I went home that day and I just thought, is this what a true friend would do to me? But that was back in high school. I was always so mad at people so easily. You know that. I got mad so easily at people. But now I was, looking back on it, why did I even question it? It was a mistake, and you didn't even know there was ice in the snowball, so, how are you going to know? And you know what? It's just a funny story to tell now, and my parents, I tell them, and they're just it scared us. And I'm like, I know, but that's my best friend. You couldn't stay mad at her. But, they're my parents, so I can't really be mad at them if they were mad at you, but they're not, of course. Juliana is loved by parents, and she always will be, right? I hope so. They're your parents. You would know better, but, honestly, I love you, Mrs. and Mr. Goldman. If you're watching this, you guys are amazing parents, and Brooklyn is such an amazing daughter, and honestly, aren't you going to see them, next week, back in, Oasis Springs? Yeah, I am going to see them in a week, and I can't wait, honestly, because, I miss my parents. They're great. They're amazing. But this isn't about my parents. This is about our stories in high school, so why don't you tell the food fight incident we had? Okay, let me get into the story. Okay, let me paint you a picture. Okay, so let's say it was around, I think, grade 11, if I'm not wrong, when me and Brooklyn were, best friends at the time. We were hanging around a lot, and we were one day sitting in the cafeteria, and I was on my phone, and Brooklyn was, looking over my shoulder, and I was texting someone that I had named on Snapchat Bestie, and Brooklyn goes, who's this? And I'm like, oh, it's just my friend Ashley. And she's like, oh, okay, well, why is her name Bestie? And I'm like, well, she's my friend from elementary school, so of course she's going to be named Bestie. And, Brooklyn just looks at me, with these eyes, excuse me? And I'm like, this is my bestie. You guys can totally meet if you want, because she's never met any of my elementary friends. So I was like, we can totally go see her and hang out. So that's what I did, and I brought Brooklyn with me, and Brooklyn did not seem happy one little bit, and I couldn't tell at the time, but now I'm like, she definitely didn't like Ashley. But, they met. She was nice to Ashley, but when we got back to school the next day, she's like, I don't really like Ashley. I don't think you should be her friend anymore. And I was like, why? And she was like, because she doesn't seem like a good person. And I'm like, well, she's my best friend, and I'm not about to do that to her. So I turn away from Brooklyn to talk to another person, and she threw a banana peel at my head. And I was like, what was that for? I turned back, and she goes, well, you didn't want to stop being friends with Ashley, so, I threw a banana peel at you. And we had such stupid fights, but this one was just chaotic, like, let me tell you. Set the record straight, I only threw that banana peel at you because I was so jealous back then. Like I said, I got mad about the easiest things, and this was just one of them. And I was like, if she doesn't want to stop being friends with Ashley, this is what I'm going to do to her. And she had, like, the nicest looking hair that day, like, the best looking, shiny as hell. And I'm like, I've got to plan something. And you know what? I planned to throw food at her. And when we tell you it was chaotic, I mean, after I threw the banana peel at Juliana, she literally threw her apple at my head, and I was like, whoa, what was that about? And Juliana was like, that's what you get, okay? Don't throw banana peels at me. I just got my hair done. And then it just broke out in a war of food. Like, we literally just started throwing crap at each other. We started throwing, like, bananas, apples, oranges, wraps from guys' lunches that we had as friends. Like, I remember it was so bad that one, like, me and Juliana both got up and started, like, slapping each other around, and I, like, grabbed Juliana and threw her to the ground and, like, started hitting her over the head, and 2 lunch ladies had to come, like, break us up, and, like, we got sent to the principal's office. It was so bad, so terrible of a fight, and I still remember to this day. And now me and Juliana laugh about it, but people were just, like, in shock watching us, filming us. It was insane back then. And you know what? It was, like, the biggest fight I think happened in our school, right? Oh, for sure, it was the biggest fight that happened in our school, because I don't think there was a bigger fight that ever happened. And you know what? People still have it. People show me it on Snapchat sometimes. I'm on my phone, and they're just like, remember this? And I'm like, oh my God, you were one of the people filming? Like, why? It's just crazy to me to think we were, like, just such jealous girls of each other at one point, and then, like, best friends again the next day, and it was like, what has happened to these two? People thought we were, like, toxic or something, I remember. And mind you, I was, like, still a new girl at this time, so people thought I was, like, crazy or something. I remember a guy coming up to me and being like, wow, you seem crazy for grabbing that girl, Juliana, like that. And I was like, she started it at the time, but it was crazy to think about. Yeah, that wasn't one of me and Brooklyn's worst fights, but, like, to us, that was pretty bad, because, like, we had been sent to the principal's office, and the principal suspended Brooklyn for 5 days and me for 3, and, like, my parents were pissed at me. I remember coming home and them screaming at me, like, what's wrong with you, Juliana? Why are you starting this fight? Like, how could you do that? How could you hit that girl? And, you know, it was just crazy to think about my room, and I was sitting there like, why did I do that to her? Why did she do that to me? It's just a person, we thought, in the end, right? Of course it was. Like, I was just a jealous girl, and that was your best friend, and I wanted to be on top. But also, that wasn't one of your worst fights. I remember you want to tell the story about that girl who ripped my coat up, what you did to her? Oh my God, I totally forgot I did that to her. So you guys remember in the last episode when we were telling you about that girl who ripped up Brooklyn's coat because she was jealous of her that she had the coat and she wanted it? Well, a year later, she came up to Brooklyn and was like, hey, like, I miss you. You want to come hang out with us at lunch? We're going to go for a ride with my boyfriend. And Brooklyn was like, oh, maybe. But I was standing right there, and I look at her, and I'm like, no, she's going to sit with us. Thank you very much. So then Brooklyn comes and sits at the table, and then all of a sudden, she comes out of nowhere and sits down beside me, because Brooklyn was on the other side of me. And she's like, oh, hey, Brooklyn, like, moving me over and shoving me. And I was like, okay, weird. And her and Brooklyn are talking, and she's like, oh my God, like, Brooklyn, don't you feel like this weird, like, force between us, like some wall is between us? And I was just so done with her, because she's hated me since middle school, because, like, everyone's prettier than this chick, and she knows it, but she doesn't want to believe it. So then finally I'm like, okay, listen here, hippo, you need to get out of here before I make you. And she was like, oh, what are you gonna do? And again, this is at the lunch table, like our other fight was, but this one was even worse, because I grabbed her by her ponytail that she was wearing that day, ripped her back, and these were, like, bleachers, like, little benches that had, like, chairs that folded out from them, so there was one right behind us, nobody's sitting there, right? pulled on her ponytail, and her head smashed against the back of the thing and hit the ground, and she started crying, and people were scurrying to her side like her two little minions, she called them. And I just remember going, oh, this girl want to go again. And she's just crying there, and I'm like, think again next time you call my best friend stupid and ugly. And so the principal comes, and he takes me to his office, and I've been suspended for 3 weeks. That was the best day and the worst day of my life, because getting home, I was grounded for, I think, a month. So, it worked out in my favor, and it didn't at the same time. Yeah, I remember you coming back to school after the 3 weeks and being like, oh, hey, guys. And, we're all looking at you like, oh, my God, what has gotten into her? And we all, pushed to the other side of the table, and you're like, guys, I'm not going to hurt you. And we were like, well, we don't know that. And we're all freaked out. But then, we know Juliana ain't gonna hurt us. We're her best friends. She's gonna mess with the people who mess with us. That's what she's gonna do. Because, honestly, Juliana became the queen of the table at that point, because Juliana scared us all, and we were all terrified of her. So we all just stayed away from Juliana for a bit. But then I went back to Juliana, because I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stand up to her. And then the food fight happened, and everything happened. And you know what? We're still best friends. And there's so many more stories, but I think that's a good place to end it, right? Don't you think? Yes, I think that's a great place to end the episode, and I feel like people love the stories we told today, and I did as well, because they were funny to look back on. And, we might be posting a third episode this week, because Brooklyn does go on that trip to see her family next week, so I feel like we should probably get 2 episodes out of the way so that we have enough room for the 4th episode when Brooklyn comes back from her trip. Yes, it's whatever works for us, right, girl? Because this is our podcast and nobody else's podcast, which is great. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of our podcast, and I hope to see you in our next podcast episodes, right, Juliana? Yes, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes that come out. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye!